The first time I heard the vinyl crackle and Elvis Presley's voice float through the room, I was instantly hooked. It was like a lightning bolt, hitting me right in the heart. But little did I know, that moment was just the beginning of a wild ride through the annals of rock and roll history. It was 1956, and Elvis's first album was making waves. The cover was a sensation, a repeated image of Elvis in a shiny gold lame suit. It was so striking that it became as famous as the music itself. The album was a mix of 10 songs, each one a gem from the previous year and a half. Tracks like One Night, Don't, and A Fool Such as I were hits, and they showed that Elvis wasn't just a pretty face. His voice was raw, powerful, and full of emotion. But there was something strange about this second volume of Gold Records. It was shorter than the first, clocking in at just 22 minutes. It was like a quick snapshot of Elvis's talent, but it didn't quite capture the full picture. Despite its iconic status, the album didn't break the top 30 charts. It was a puzzle, a hint that something was changing. Then in 1960, Elvis came back from the army and everything changed. The album Elvis is Back was like a breath of fresh air. It was a musical journey through all the genres that influenced Elvis rock and roll, country and blues. The last 2 tracks were especially sensational, showcasing his deep, matured voice. For the first time, fans could hear Elvis in stereo, and it was a whole new experience. The album was a masterpiece, a perfect blend of old and new, and it felt like Elvis was back with a vengeance. But the music industry is fickle, and the next album, GI Blues, showed a different side of Elvis. It was a Hollywood musical, a strategic move to broaden his appeal beyond his loyal teenage fans. The album wasn't his greatest artistic success, but it was a commercial triumph. It outsold Elvis is Back by a wide margin, and the ballad Doin' the Best I Can was a standout. The album was a mix of fun and fluff, a souvenir for those who saw the film. Elvis's first full-length gospel album, His Hand in Mine, came out the same year. It was a personal project, a chance for Elvis to sing the songs that had meant so much to him growing up. The album was a spiritual journey, with tracks like Milky White Way and Swing Down Sweet Chariot, showing his deep connection to the material. It was a different kind of music, but it was just as powerful. The year 1961 brought Something for Everybody, a sequel to Elvis is Back, but this time the fire was missing. The album had some great moments like There's Always Me, but overall it felt a bit bland. Elvis's singing was more polite, and the material was less exciting. It was the first sign that Elvis was losing his musical direction, and it was a wake-up call for his fans. But then came Blue Hawaii, an album that took Elvis to new heights. This soundtrack was a perfect blend of Latin rhythms and beautiful ballads. Elvis sang with such beauty and passion, and Can't Help Falling in Love became one of his most iconic performances. The album was a success, and it showed that Elvis could still deliver when he put his mind to it. The journey of Elvis's music was a roller coaster with highs and lows, but each album told a story. From the raw energy of his early days to the polished sound of his later years, Elvis Presley was a legend in the making, and every album was a chapter in his incredible story. The soundtrack to the 1968 TV special was a roller coaster of emotions. The music was fantastic, but listening to it on record wasn't the same. The live parts had some sound issues, and one part even sounded like someone was vacuuming in the background. It's a shame because the music really shines when you hear it in the 4-CD box set that came out years later. The sound is much better, and the songs make more sense when you hear them in the right order. It's like the difference between seeing a movie in a theater and watching a chopped-up version on TV. From Elvis in Memphis, released in 1969, was a game-changer. Elvis was back to his best, and every song on the album was a hit. Tracks like In the Ghetto, Long Black Limousine, and Only the Strong Survive are some of the best Elvis ever recorded. It was a big step up from his previous album, Potluck, which felt weak in comparison. This album showed Elvis as a mature artist, and it's no exaggeration to say it's one of his best. From Memphis to Vegas, from Vegas to Memphis, also from 1969, was a bit of a strange pairing. One part was a live album from Las Vegas, and the other was more studio recordings from Memphis. Both parts were great, but putting them together didn't quite work. The live album, later known as Elvis in Person, captured the energy of Elvis's comeback concerts, especially with the 7-minute version of Suspicious Minds. The studio album, Back in Memphis, was also strong, but it took a few listens to really appreciate the songs. Let's Be Friends from 1970 was a budget album with songs from Elvis's late 1960s movies. It wasn't the most exciting, but it had some nice moments like Almost from The Trouble with Girls and I'll Be There, a smooth cover of a Bobby Darin song. The CD version had a shorter version of Mama, which was a bit of a letdown given how short the album already was. On Stage February 1970 was another live album, but this time Elvis tackled pop and rock standards he hadn't recorded before. The Wonder of You became a big hit, and songs like Polk Salad Annie and Walk a Mile in My Shoes became closely associated with Elvis. Even though Yesterday was a bit weak, the album is one of Elvis's best from the 1970s. Worldwide 50 Gold Award Hits, Volume 1 from 1970, was basically a greatest hits package. It was a way for RCA to cash in on Elvis's return to form, but it's not as necessary now because all the songs are available elsewhere. Still, it's a good summary of Elvis's first 14 years at RCA. Almost in Love, also from 1970, was another budget release with songs from the late 1960s movies. Surprisingly, it held together well and sounded modern. It's a good place to start if you want to explore the best material from Elvis's films. Elvis Christmas Album, also from 1970, was a collection of Christmas songs. It included tracks from 1957, 1966, and 1969, and it's the version of Elvis's Christmas songs that many people grew up with. The holiday songs really shine, especially on a snowy Christmas night, and O Come All Ye Faithful. That's the Way It Is, from 1970, was a mix of live recordings from Las Vegas and studio sessions. It's one of Elvis's best albums of easy listening material, with standout tracks like I Just Can't Help Believin' and You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'. The live versions of I've Lost You and Patch It Up were a bit weaker, but the album as a whole is fantastic. Elvis Country, from 1971, is another contender for Elvis's best album. It's a collection of country songs, both old and new, and it's sometimes called Elvis's concept album because of the snippets of I Was Born About 10,000 Years Ago between the songs. The album has some amazing performances, like Tomorrow Never Comes, and Funny How Time Slips Away, but the snippets between songs don't really add much. You'll Never Walk Alone, from 1971, was a Camden release with some of Elvis's gospel material. It included songs from the Peace in the Valley EP and some soundtrack songs. It's not essential, but it's a pleasant listen. Love Letters from Elvis, from 1971, was a sign that the artistic heights of the comeback were over. It was a collection of mostly weak tracks from the 1970 sessions, and the overdubs with woodwind and horns made it sound like elevator music. It's not even an album of love songs, and it's hard to recommend. Come On Everybody, from 1971, was another budget album with tracks from Elvis's 1960s movie soundtracks. It was a strange release, but surprisingly enjoyable. The Other Side's Elvis Worldwide Gold Award Hits, Volume 2, from 1971, was a 4-LP collection of B-sides and EP tracks. It's an interesting compilation, but with so many Elvis compilations available now, it's not as necessary. I Got Lucky, from 1971, continued where Come On Everybody left off. It included tracks from Elvis's 1960s movie soundtracks and the fun Fools Fall in Love. It's the weaker of the two, partly because of the inclusion of Yoga Is As Yoga Does, but the song I Need Somebody to Lean On is a standout. Elvis Sings the Wonderful World of Christmas, from 1971, was a disappointing follow-up to Elvis's 1957 Christmas album. Elvis sounded uninterested, and the songs were morose. There were a few highlights, like On a Snowy Christmas Night and Merry Christmas Baby, but it's a tough listen overall. Elvis Now, from 1972, was a collection of leftovers and cast-offs from the 1971 sessions. There were a couple of good songs, like Early Morning Rain And I was born about 10,000 years ago, but it could have been much better given the material in the vault. He Touched Me from 1972 was a gospel album that won Elvis his second Grammy. It mixed traditional gospel with modern Christian rock, but it didn't gel as a cohesive album. The title track and Reach Out to Jesus were highlights, but some songs were bland. Elvis Sings Hits from His Movies, Volume 1 from 1972, was a pointless album with songs that weren't really hits. It's hard to see the point of this release. Elvis as Recorded at Madison Square Garden from 1972 captured Elvis giving an energized performance. The original mix wasn't great, but recent remasters have improved it. The concert included great versions of Proud Mary and The Impossible Dream. Burning Love and Hits from His Movies from 1972 included the hit single Burning Love and some movie songs based on folk and classical music. It's not the strongest album, but has its moments. Separate Ways from 1972 was another budget album with a hit single, Separate Ways, and some older tracks. The cover art was bizarre, but the album was pleasant enough. Aloha from Hawaii via Satellite from 1973 was a double LP that became Elvis's last #1 album in America during his lifetime. Elvis's voice had a nasal quality, and the performance was laid back, but there were standout songs like I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry and My Way. Elvis the Fool album from 1973 was one of the most low-key albums of Elvis's career. It included some good piano songs and the folkish For Lovin' Me, but it was mostly mediocre. Raised on Rock for All Time's Sake from 1973 was a mix of upbeat and reflective songs. Elvis sounded tired, and some songs, like Three Corn Patches, were weak. However, the soul and funk tracks were a highlight. Elvis, a Legendary Performer Volume 1 from late 1973 or 1974, was a package of master recordings and unreleased live performances. It included songs from the 1968 TV special and charted well, leading to more volumes in the series. Good Times from 1974 was another chapter in Elvis's discography, and it showed that even as the 1970s progressed, Elvis was still capable of delivering great music, even if the album didn't always live up to his best work. Elvis had a way of capturing hearts through his music, even when the quality of his albums fluctuated. After returning to Stax in December 1973, he released an album that, while not his best, had its moments. Songs like I Got a Feeling in My Body and Talk About the Good Times brought some life to the album, but most of the tracks were lackluster. This album was a bit of a disappointment, earning a 5 out of 10. But things took a turn for the better with Elvis recorded live on stage in Memphis in 1974. This album, recorded in March, showcased Elvis at his best during a live performance. The energy was high, and songs like Trying to Get to You and How Great Thou Art stood out. The latter even won him a Grammy. The album was a lot of fun, and even the Legacy Edition, which included the complete concert, was a mixed bag but still worth a listen. It scored an 8 out of 10. Not all of Elvis's albums were winners, though. Having Fun with Elvis on Stage from 1974 was more of a novelty. It featured Elvis talking and laughing, but there were no songs. It was a bit pointless and got a 0 out of 10. The second album from the December 1973 sessions, Promised Land, was a step up. The title track was a standout, and songs like There's a Honky Tonk Angel and Help Me showed Elvis's countryside. This album marked the beginning of a brief improvement in his studio work, and earned a 6 out of 10. RCA often released compilations to capitalize on Elvis's popularity. Pure Gold from 1975 was one such example, but it was a mix of hits and album tracks from different years. While it sold well, the track listing was a bit random, earning it a 6 out of 10. Today, from 1975, was a surprising gem. It was a strong country-themed album that featured powerful songs like Trouble and I Can Help. This album was a return to form for Elvis and got a 7 out of 10. Elvis's live performances were often more dynamic than his studio albums. Elvis, a Legendary Performer Volume 2, from 1976 featured alternate takes and live performances, though the track listing was a bit haphazard. It was a decent listen, earning a 5 out of 10. The Sun Sessions, from 1975, released in the USA in 1976, was a collection of Elvis's early recordings at Sun Studio. It was a stellar compilation that showcased the raw talent of his early days. The sound quality was excellent, and it remains a must-listen, scoring a perfect 10 out of 10. However, From Elvis Presley Boulevard, Memphis, Tennessee, from 1976 was a low point. Recorded in the Jungle Room at Graceland, the album was mostly made up of slow, melancholic ballads. Only a few songs, like Danny Boy, stood out. It was a disappointing 3 out of 10. Welcome to My World, from 1977, was a country-themed compilation with a few unreleased tracks. While it wasn't groundbreaking, it was a nice mix and performed well, earning a 5 out of 10. Elvis's last studio album before his death, Moody Blue, from 1977, was a mix of singles and live tracks. Despite his declining health, Elvis delivered strong performances on songs like Way Down and Unchained Melody. The album held together surprisingly well, earning a 6 out of 10. Elvis in Concert, the first posthumous release, was a double album from his last tour in June 1977. It was clear that Elvis was struggling, but some performances, like That's All Right, were still powerful. The album was a bittersweet 3 out of 10, but remains an important part of his legacy. Elvis Aaron Presley, an 8 LP box set from 1980, was a treasure trove for fans. It included live recordings, alternate takes, and uncompiled singles. The set was well received and earned a 7 out of 10. A Golden Celebration, from 1984, was a 6 LP set focusing on early Elvis, with alternate takes, live recordings, and private recordings. Despite poor sound quality, it was a significant release, marking RCA recognition of Elvis's historical importance. It also earned a 7 out of 10. Essential Elvis, the first movies, from 1986, released in the USA in 1988, featured master takes from the first 3 movies and alternate takes. It was a revelation at the time and remains important, scoring a 9 out of 10. Stereo 57, Essential Elvis Volume 2, from 1989, focused on recordings from early 1957. While not his best period, it was still enjoyable, with highlights like alternate takes of Peace in the Valley and That's When Your Heartaches Begin. It earned a 7 out of 10. Hits Like Never Before, Essential Elvis Volume 3, from 1990, concentrated on recordings from 1958. The disc was filled with unreleased material, making it a standout, with highlights like King Creole and Crawfish. It scored an 8 out of 10. Collector's Gold, from 1991, was a 3-disc set of unreleased material from the 1960s. The live recordings from 1969 were particularly noteworthy, including songs like Inherit the Wind and Rubberneckin'. The set was hugely enjoyable and earned an 8 out of 10. Double features, from 1993 to 1995, saw the re-release of 1960s soundtrack recordings in superior form. Many were remixed for better sound quality, and some included unreleased songs and alternate takes. The final disc, focusing on non-formula films, was especially good, earning the series a 7 out of 10. If Every Day Was Like Christmas, from 1994, merged Elvis's 2 Christmas albums with alternate takes. Despite the errors in the liner notes, it was the best release of this material during the CD era. The maudlin numbers were interspersed throughout the disc, earning it a 7 out of 10. 100 Years From Now, Essential Elvis Volume 4, from 1996, focused on recordings from 1970 and 1971. The alternate takes sounded different without the overdubs, with highlights like Bridge Over Troubled Water and The Lord's Prayer. It earned an 8 out of 10. Platinum, A Life in Music, from 1997, was a 4-CD set that told Elvis's career story through live recordings, alternate takes, and private recordings. It was one of the best Elvis box sets ever released, with highlights like Tennessee Waltz and You'll Never Walk Alone. It earned a perfect 10 out of 10. Brightest Star on Sunset Boulevard, a bootleg release from 1998, featured recordings from rehearsals for the 1970 Las Vegas season. While some might find Elvis's humor off-putting, hearing him at work was fascinating, earning it a 7 out of 10. The Home Recordings, from 1999, was a risk, featuring often poor-sounding home recordings. Despite some flaws, it was a fascinating listen, especially the 1966 recordings. It earned a 6 out of 10. Such a Night, Essential Elvis, Volume 6. From 2000 focused on recordings from Nashville between 1960 and 1964. It was a strong collection of alternate takes, though some were very similar to the masters. It earned a 7 out of 10. Live in Las Vegas, from 2001 was a 4-CD set with some flaws, but included complete concerts from 1969 and 1970, making it worth the price. It earned a 6 out of 10. Memphis Sessions, from 2001 was a disc of outtakes from the 1969 Memphis Sessions. While not entirely satisfying, it was still fascinating, especially the alternate takes of Power of My Love and Suspicious Minds. It earned a 7 out of 10. Today, Tomorrow, and Forever, from 2002 was another 4-CD set of alternate takes and live performances. Not as strong as Platinum, it still had some nice performances, and included the first official release of the Little Rock Concert from 1956. It earned a 7 out of 10. Close Up, from 2003 was a 4-CD set with a mix of soundtracks, Nashville recordings, and a concert from 1972. The main highlight was the only official release of any of the concerts recorded for the Elvis on Tour documentary. It earned a 6 out of 10. So High, Nashville Outtakes 1966 to 1968. From 2004 was a collection of outtakes from the Nashville sessions. It was a bit unsatisfying but still interesting, especially the alternate takes of Power of My Love and Suspicious Minds. It earned a 7 out of 10. Elvis's career had its ups and downs, but the non-soundtrack recordings from 1966 to 1968 are a hidden gem. During this time, Elvis was often in great form, especially during the How Great Thou Art sessions. Songs like Guitar Man, High Heel Sneakers, and You'll Never Walk Alone showcase his versatility and talent. The quality of these recordings is impressive, making them a must-listen for any Elvis fan. In 1971, Elvis recorded a batch of songs that were later released on a disc called I Sing All Kinds. This collection is a bit uneven, but it includes both seasonal and non-seasonal material. Despite its patchiness, it's a valuable addition to any fan's collection, especially since it's the only single disc set of outtakes from that period. The sound quality is decent, and there are enough standout tracks to keep you engaged. The 1968 Comeback Special is a legendary moment in Elvis's career. Finally, in 2008, all 4 unedited live segments of the TV special were compiled into one package. This release includes the original album, bonus tracks, and even the tapes of the dressing room rehearsals. It's a comprehensive look at one of Elvis's most pivotal moments, and the quality of the music is outstanding. The only minor complaint is that some bonus tracks weren't integrated into the medleys they were originally meant for, but that's a small issue given the overall excellence of the package. In 1974, Elvis performed a series of concerts in Las Vegas, and one of the highlights is the Nevada Nights double CD set. The opening night performance stands out, with Elvis trying out new songs that he would later abandon. While his singing isn't always inspired, the inclusion of rare performances like Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues and Down in the Alley makes this release a must-have for die-hard fans. The soundboard quality isn't the best, but it's still a fascinating listen. The 1971 concert at Boston Garden was a significant performance, and it was eventually released officially in 2010. This concert shows Elvis back in top form, after a period of inconsistency. The sound isn't perfect, but it's good enough to enjoy the spirited performance. It's a testament to Elvis's ability to deliver when it mattered most. Another standout release is the 1976 Chicago Stadium double disc set, which captures 2 concerts from October 15th and 16th. Elvis is in surprisingly good form, especially considering the challenges he faced that year. The sound quality is excellent, particularly in the second concert. While he struggles with quieter ballads, he shines on more energetic songs like Steamroller Blues and You Gave Me a Mountain. The 2011 release, Young Man with the Big Beat, is a 5-disc set that includes all of Elvis's studio recordings from 1956, along with alternate takes, interviews, and live recordings. One of the highlights is a newly discovered Louisiana Hayride performance from December 1956. This set is a treasure trove for Elvis fans, offering a deep dive into his early career. Elvis at Stax from 2013 is another important release, featuring the majority of the alternate takes from the 1973 Stax sessions, along with the master takes. While it may not be the most uplifting listening experience, it's still a valuable collection for anyone interested in Elvis's later work. Way Down in the Jungle Room from 2016 is a 2-disc set that captures Elvis's last recording sessions. The first disc features the master takes, and the second disc includes alternate versions. Despite the challenges Elvis was facing at the time, this set shows that he could still deliver when he was fully committed. The Hometown Shows from 2016 includes 2 Memphis concerts from 1974 and 1975. The 1974 show, in particular, is a standout, with Elvis in fine spirits and voice. The soundboard quality is exceptional, making it one of the best-sounding recordings of Elvis's live performances. Finally, A Boy from Tupelo, from 2017, is a 3-disc set that includes all of Elvis's recordings from the Sun Studios period, along with outtakes and live recordings. This release is historically significant, providing a complete look at Elvis's early career and the roots of his musical journey. It's a fitting end to any collection of Elvis's work, showing where it all began. The world of Elvis Presley was a whirlwind of music, movies, and media attention. From his early days as a shy singer in Memphis to his rise as the king of rock and roll, Elvis captivated millions with his unique style and magnetic presence. In the late 1950s, Elvis's fame exploded. Articles like The Private Life of Elvis Presley in the Decatur Herald and Elvis Presley's Rise from Nothing to Top Song Star at 21 started at 11. In the Lakeland Ledger painted a picture of a young man who had overcome humble beginnings to become a superstar. People were fascinated by his journey, and his success was a source of inspiration for many. However, not everyone was a fan. Critics like Pat Doncaster in the Daily Mirror wrote pieces like, "Do we want this shockin' rockin'?" questioning the impact of Elvis's music on society. Despite the criticism, Elvis's popularity only grew. His performances on TV shows and in movies like Loving You and Jailhouse Rock were met with enthusiasm from fans and mixed reviews from critics. As the 1960s rolled in, Elvis's career took new turns. He continued to make movies, but some of them, like Charo and The Trouble with Girls, received lukewarm reviews. Roger Greenspun in the New York Times described The Trouble with Girls as a disappointment, while other critics like Penelope Gilliatt in the Observer Weekend Review found some of his films to be more interesting than others. Elvis's personal life also came under scrutiny. Articles like If Only Mom Had Lived to See My Child, in Photoplay, and Elvis is Discharged from Hospital, in the Hattiesburg American gave readers a glimpse into his more private moments. His relationships, health, and performances were always topics of interest. By the 1970s, Elvis's music had evolved. He started incorporating more gospel and rock elements into his shows, as noted by critics like Don Heckman in the New York Times. His live performances, especially in Las Vegas, were legendary. Robert Hilburn in the Los Angeles Times described Elvis's concerts as powerful and emotional, showcasing his incredible talent and stage presence. However, the pressures of fame and the demands of his career began to take a toll. Articles like Elvis Blues in The Guardian and Elvis, No Longer Young, Must He Still Symbolize Youth, in the Cincinnati Enquirer reflected the changing public perception of Elvis. Some fans and critics wondered if Elvis was still the same vibrant performer they remembered from his early days. Despite the challenges, Elvis continued to perform and record. His final years were marked by both triumphs and struggles. Articles like Elvis Presley, 42, discovered dead in his Memphis manse, possibly of a heart attack, in Variety announced his untimely death, leaving a legacy that continues to influence music and culture to this day. Elvis Presley's story is a mix of triumph, controversy, and endless fascination. His impact on music, movies, and popular culture is undeniable, and his life continues to be a subject of interest for fans and historians alike. The year was 1956, and the world was buzzing with the electrifying presence of Elvis Presley. His performances were nothing short of a sensation, drawing crowds that seemed to defy the laws of gravity. On July 13, 1956, the Moberly Monitor Index reported that Elvis had signed with Ed Sullivan, a move that would bring him even more fame and exposure. The article described the excitement and the anticipation of fans who were eager to see Elvis on one of the most popular television shows of the time. Elvis's impact wasn't just limited to his live performances. His films were also making waves. The monthly film bulletin reviewed several of his movies, each one bringing a new dimension to his career. In November 1966, they reviewed California Holiday, praising it for its light-hearted charm. A year earlier, in July 1962, they reviewed Follow That Dream, noting how Elvis's charisma shone through, even in a more subdued role. The review for Frankie and Johnny in May 1966 highlighted the chemistry between Elvis and Anne Margaret, a pairing that many fans found irresistible, but Elvis's journey wasn't always smooth. By the mid-1970s, his health began to show signs of strain. In December 1975, Modern Screen magazine published an article titled, "Elvis in Trouble, Overweight, Ailing, and Rejected." The piece delved into the personal struggles Elvis was facing, revealing a side of him that was rarely seen in the spotlight. Despite his issues, Elvis continued to perform, drawing large crowds and maintaining his status as a cultural icon. The media's fascination with Elvis never waned. On May 25, 1956, the Monroe Star-News reported a chaotic scene at one of his shows, where teenagers mobbed him, causing a commotion that nearly shut down the event. The article captured the intensity of Elvis's fan base, a group that was as passionate as they were unpredictable. Elvis's musical journey was also well documented. In December 1957, Robert Moore wrote for the Arizona Daily Star about Elvis's Christmas album, expressing surprise at the singer's ability to transition from rock and roll to holiday tunes. The article reflected the changing perception of Elvis, who was no longer just a rebellious teen idol, but a versatile artist capable of connecting with a broader audience. The late 1960s and early 1970s saw Elvis continuing to perform, but the reviews began to reflect a more critical tone. In October 1968, Variety reviewed Live a Little, Love a Little, noting that while Elvis's energy was still present, his performances were starting to show signs of wear. The review for That's the Way It Is, in October 1970, however, offered a more positive outlook, highlighting the enduring appeal of Elvis's live shows. Elvis's impact on popular culture was undeniable. In August 1975, John Rockwell wrote in the New York Times about Elvis's role in shaping rock and roll, describing him as a pivotal figure whose influence could be felt in the music of countless artists. Even after his death in 1977, the outpouring of tributes and remembrances in various publications, including Variety, underscored his lasting legacy. The media's chronicling of Elvis's life and career provides a rich tapestry of his journey from a young, rebellious singer to a cultural icon. Each article and review adds a layer to the story of a man who not only defined an era, but also left an indelible mark on the world of music and entertainment. Elvis Presley's career was a roller coaster of fame, controversy, and transformation. By the late 1950s, he had become a cultural phenomenon, but not everyone was a fan. Critics and moral guardians were quick to voice their concerns, while his loyal fans defended him with passion. In 1956, Elvis appeared on The Steve Allen Show, where he performed Hound Dog in a tuxedo, a stark contrast to his usual rock and roll attire. Steve Allen, the host, later defended his decision to have Elvis on the show, stating that it was important to give the young star a platform. Despite this, some critics were not convinced. Jack Good of the New York Times criticized the show for exploiting teen audiences, calling it a lack of responsibility. Elvis's first film, Love Me Tender, was released in November 1956. The movie was a mix of drama and music, and it received mixed reviews. Some praised Elvis's acting, while others were critical of the film's quality. The Times of London's review was particularly scathing, suggesting that the film was a poor attempt to capitalize on Elvis's fame. As Elvis's popularity grew, so did the backlash. Articles and editorials in newspapers and magazines began to question his influence on young people. Some called him a sex symbol and a Pied Piper of sex, while others accused him of promoting immoral behavior. Inez Robb, a columnist, wrote that Elvis's fans must be straight from the gutter, a harsh and unfounded judgment. Despite the criticism, Elvis's fans remained loyal. They defended him in letters to the editor and in fan magazines. For many teenagers, Elvis was a symbol of rebellion and freedom. His music and performances were a way to express themselves and break away from the conformist culture of the 1950s. Elvis's music continued to dominate the charts. His songs like Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, and Don't Be Cruel were hits that resonated with a generation. The Billboard charts consistently featured Elvis's records, and his live performances drew huge crowds. However, not everyone was impressed. Some critics, like Arthur J. Sasso and Harold Littledale, wrote that Elvis was wrecking rock and roll with his gyrations. In 1957, Elvis released his second film, Loving You. The movie was more of a musical, and it was generally well received. The New York Times praised Elvis's performance, suggesting that he was improving as an actor. However, the film also faced its share of criticism. Some reviewers felt that the plot was weak, and that the movie relied too much on Elvis's musical numbers. Elvis's impact on popular culture was undeniable. He was a household name, and his influence extended beyond music. His style, from his hair to his clothes, became a trend that many young people emulated. Even as he faced criticism and controversy, Elvis continued to evolve. His music and performances adapted to the changing times, and he remained a beloved figure for many. The tension between Elvis's critics and his fans was a defining feature of his early career. While some saw him as a threat to society, others saw him as a hero. This dynamic played out in the media, with articles and editorials reflecting the divided opinions of the public. Despite the challenges, Elvis's rise to fame was a testament to his talent and the power of his music. As the 1950s came to a close, Elvis's career was at its peak. He had become a cultural icon, and his influence on music and popular culture was profound. The debates and controversies surrounding him only added to his legend, making him a symbol of the changing times. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had a journey that was as dynamic as his music. By the mid-1960s, Elvis was a household name, but his career was evolving in new directions. His early days of rock and roll had given way to a blend of film acting and a more polished musical style. In 1964, Elvis starred in Viva Las Vegas with Anne Margaret, a film that showed a more relaxed and charming side of the king. Critics and fans alike enjoyed his performance, and it became one of his most popular movies. Despite the success, Elvis was starting to feel the pressure of the film industry, which often typecast him in light-hearted, musical roles that didn't fully showcase his range as an actor. Elvis's musical output during this period was also changing. He released albums like Kissin' Cousins and Roustabout, which included both upbeat rock and roll tracks and more mellow, ballad-style songs. These albums continued to sell well, but some critics noted that Elvis was starting to lose some of his edge and creativity. By the mid-1960s, Elvis was a complex figure. He was still a massive star, but he was also facing new challenges. His relationships with fans and the media were evolving, and he was beginning to explore his spiritual side more openly. In interviews, he talked about his faith and his desire to connect with his audience on a deeper level. Despite the changes, Elvis's impact on popular culture was undeniable. His influence on music, fashion, and entertainment was profound, and he continued to be a major force in the industry. However, the late 1960s would see Elvis undergo another significant transformation, as he returned to live performances and began to reinvent himself once again. Elvis's legacy is one of innovation, passion, and the ability to capture the hearts of millions. His journey from a young, energetic performer to a multifaceted artist is a testament to his enduring talent and charisma. As the 1960s progressed, Elvis Presley remained a king, but his throne was one that he continually reshaped and redefined.